Hey team, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of the Lifestyle You podcast. It's your host, Lacey Iskra. I hope everyone had an amazing Christmas. I think by the time that you'll be listening to this, Christmas will have passed. I'm actually recording this podcast before Christmas, but I hope everyone enjoyed the time with their families and their friends and got to eat lots of good food and hopefully got a good present or two. I'm actually heading to Lloydminster to spend Christmas with my sisters and their babies, and I am so excited. So as we are creeping up on New Year's and just everyone setting New Year's resolutions and all of that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the fear of failure on today's episode, because I think that the fear of failure is super common. I think it's obviously a little bit, it's expected almost out of being human because it's scary. And the thought of failure is scary. And lots of us are so wrapped up in just what people think that the fear of failure and even just the thought of what people think about us holds us back from taking so many chances in life. And I really, when I think about fear of failure, I have so much. The reason that I love the gym so much is because I think for me, that was what really taught me that failure is a good thing. And you look to fail at the gym. Like you want to push yourself lifting weights, and you know you're doing that when you can no longer lift anymore and you, what we call, go to failure. And so I think for me that was just such a huge life lesson, was understanding how important failure really is. And failure is just such a weird topic to even begin with, because I don't really even know if you can fail. Like there's always lessons. And I mean, I guess you can fail because you fail if you quit and you stop trying. But the gym, to me, it was like every time I'm going in there, I want to fail. Failure is the goal. That's how I'm going to know that I'm going to be getting stronger. And each week I go there again with the same goal, is to try to bring myself to failure. And so I just have like so much gratitude towards the gym, I guess, for teaching me that lesson, because I don't think that if I would have learned that lesson, I probably wouldn't have done a lot of things that I have done now in my life, which bring me an insane amount of happiness. And that's just because I got comfortable with the thought of failure. And I really learned that failure isn't a bad thing. It's always a good thing. There's so many lessons to be learned, and you don't ever really completely fail, like I said, unless you give up. So I just want to talk a little bit about what the fear of failure is, and then some steps to overcome it. Because I think with New Year's coming up, we're all setting those New Year's resolutions. And even if we go as far as setting New Year resolutions, things that we want to do or things that we want to change, that can be scary enough in itself. But oftentimes when we really start to take the steps towards making those happen, we can start to experience the fear of failure. And oftentimes we will end up sabotaging ourselves in those goals because we just really want to avoid failure. And so sometimes we will make it seem like we meant to fail, or like we're not even trying. And so that when we fail, we can just pawn it off on that and say like, well, I didn't even try that hard. Like, well, I knew I failed because of this, or whatever it may be. So like I said in the very beginning, fear is a part of human nature. I don't really think that there's any way to get around it. And we were also designed for it for many reasons, because fear of certain things actually really benefit us. Because if we weren't scared of anything, then a lot of us would probably end up dead. But like, especially when I started my online coaching company, there was so much fear around failure. And I think because of just all the lessons that I learned in the gym of understanding what failure is that what really allowed me to push through that fear. And then even just overcoming the fear of what people would think. And I always hate that saying of like, you shouldn't care what people think, because you should care what certain people think. It's just really starting to understand who those people are that you care about what they think about you, because you shouldn't care about that one person in grade 8, what they might think if you go to try to do this new business, or you quit your job, or you want to try to get a six-pack for the first time, or whatever it may be. Like, there are certain people who you shouldn't care, but there are certain people who you should care about what they think. And I think it's really just getting clear on who those people are, and then why you also chose them. So literally, when I started my online coaching company, it took me like 6 months of me talking about it. I remember I would even tell people I had clients when I didn't, because I was that scared. And it took me like 6 months of convincing myself that I was going to do this. And really, what really happened for me to finally take the plunge was I got anxiety. I started getting anxiety so bad because I kept saying I was going to do this thing, and then I was just constantly not doing it. And lots of the times, anxiety is that gap between when you say you're going to do something and then actually doing it. And the larger that gap is, the more your anxiety is going to increase. So just keep that in mind. I remember I've told this story in a couple Instagram posts about when I started getting anxiety for the first time. And then me and my sister joked back and forth that it was called POS anxiety, which stands for piece of shit anxiety, which is super harsh on myself. I kind of regret saying that to myself because I don't think I was being a piece of shit. But why we joked about that was because I was experiencing anxiety from not doing the thing that I said I was going to do. And eventually that feeling of anxiety just got so bad that I was like, I just need to do this and I need to go for it. And then I just set myself up for success in so many ways. I hired a mentor right away. So literally before I even started my business, I had already hired a business mentor to help me. That put me negative $500 in the bank account. But I was like, well, this is going to increase my chance of success if I have someone telling me exactly what to do and how to do it, and then also being accountable to that person and having to do certain things with them checking in. Like, that's going to increase my chance of success. And I put myself in a place at work where I was going to be making less money. So I was currently working at Cactus Club in Edmonton, and I asked them to give me less shifts as a server. And so I've also put the pressure on myself in that way, where I didn't have a whole bunch of money coming in and I almost needed to do it in order to make money. So lots of ways that you can set yourself up for success so that fear of failure doesn't seem so possible, but it's always there and it never really goes away. So fear of failure can be so strong that avoiding failure eclipses the motivation to succeed. So it almost overcomes that motivation to succeed. And insecurity about doing things incorrectly causes many people to unconsciously sabotage their chances for success, which is what we are trying to avoid. So we're going to go over what can cause fear of failure and why it can hold you back, and then also how we can overcome the fear of failure so that you can use failure to your advantage instead of letting it run your life. Because I believe that this is one of the most important things to learn how to navigate if you do want to just be like the happiest version of yourself. And I was reading about the fear of failure, doing research for this, and there is actually like a phobia where people are like legitimately scared of failure, which this is not what this podcast is about. If you actually have been told that you have it, I can't remember what the word was, but it's some sort of phobia, then you might need medical help. So not saying that this is going to cure all fear of failure, but if you're just like the normal person who has a normal fear of failure, then this will really help. So fear of failure will cause us to avoid potentially harmful situations, but it will also keep us from reaching our full potential. And fear of failure keeps us from trying. It creates self-doubt, it stalls progress, and it may lead us to go against our morals. So here are the main reasons why fear of failure exists. So not that this is going to be a surprise, but your childhood environment. It's actually crazy how many things go back to our childhood and just those early years, what happened and how our parents reacted, how we reacted, how any person in power, like a teacher or a coach or your parent or your older siblings or your best friend's older siblings or anyone that was kind of above you that you looked up to, how they reacted in certain situations, you were taught that failure is unacceptable. So that is what causes fear of failure. And it can be a learned behavior. So the fear of failure can lead to psychological, emotional issues like panic attacks, depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and shame. And you may have had people in your life who gave you ultimatums and enforced fear-based rules. So maybe you got in trouble one time when you failed a test. And I know it's not like, oh, we just want to let our kids get away with failing tests or anything like that, but it's just a lot of the way that reactions, and it's just crazy how much like one little thing that happened, one little saying, one little comment can therefore lead to a life of the fear of failure. And so it is super important to just be aware of these things, especially if we are a parent, because it can change the course of someone's life if they have this. So childhood environment, if fear of failure was, or if failure was just really looked at a bad thing and you got in a lot of trouble and you weren't taught how to learn from your mistakes, but instead just punished for them, then you're more likely to have a fear of failure in adulthood. The second one is, I don't really know how to say this, but it's almost like over personalization. Like, I don't really know if that's even a word, but you almost over identify with failures. So you're almost so much in your head that you may believe that your failures signify, like, inform how others see you, and your fear being viewed as, and you fear being viewed as a failure. So you're almost like so in your head, you tell yourself so many stories about what other people think of you failing that it actually starts to affect whether or not you take action. So it's very, very like ego driven, and it may lead us to over identifying with our failures. And then the last one is perfectionism. So super common for perfectionists, failure is so terrible and it's humiliating, and they don't even end up trying. And I really don't enjoy when people call themselves perfectionists, because again, I think it is just a scapegoat to not doing anything because it has to be perfect, that you're so scared of failure that you just put that burden on yourself. And we all know perfect doesn't exist. That's not a real thing. No one's perfect. Nothing is perfect. And everyone has a different idea of what perfect is. So for perfectionists, failure is so terrible and humiliating that they don't try. So stepping outside your comfort zone becomes super terrifying. Perfectionism can similarly arise from childhood, surprise, surprise, if the idea of anything less than perfect was perceived as a failure. And then the ego will usually lead you to want to aim for perfection and want to please others. So perfectionism is a really, really big one that can cause fear of failure, but you just really have to understand that that is you calling yourself a perfectionist is actually self-sabotaging you towards taking action. So the fear of failure holds people back for very different reasons. And we hear a lot about being positive, but maybe we also need to recognize that the negative parts of our lives and experience have just as important a role to play in finding success in the work, in work and in life. Meaning, we all put so much pressure on thinking positive, being positive, and anything that happens that was positive is so amazing and great, but we never try to find the lessons in things where we fail, or maybe they didn't turn out the exact way that we want them. And oftentimes this just comes down to lack of reflection, like looking at something that you at the time thought was the biggest failure ever, or was something horrible that happened, and looking to see how that changed the trajectory of your life and where you are now, and what lessons did you learn from that. And I think one thing that I've become very good at mastering is understanding that everything is happening for me and not to me. And literally anything, good or bad, I choose to look at that and be like, okay, what lessons am I learning? What's coming out from this? There's a reason that this is happening. And even if I can't see it right now, at some point in my life down the road, this is going to benefit me. Even if right now it seems like the worst possible thing ever, you can eventually learn to just like generate your thoughts in a certain direction so that you can see the positives in even a failure. And it's actually funny because I'm working with a mindset coach right now, and we did all these tests to kind of measure different personality traits, and optimism was something that I actually scored too high in, which I didn't even think was a thing, but it's almost like sometimes I'm just out in space. Like I'm not necessarily living in the present moment because my thoughts just automatically go to like, everything's going to be fine. Everything happens for a reason. And I was actually too optimistic. And he's like, you need to turn down your optimism. And I'm like, how does one just turn down your optimism? But that was a little side tangent, but it's just kind of funny how you can, I trained myself to be so positive that now it's a bad thing and it's actually impacting my mindset, but not saying that that's going to happen to you if you just try to gather your thoughts to go more positive. But I think it's just because I've been doing a lot of work for a lot of years that I might be a little swayed on the scale. So yeah, the fear of failure, it will hold you back. And it's just super important to be able to understand that positive things do come from things that seem really friggin' bad at the time. And many fail because of your just like ego-driven commitment to what worked in the past. And I see this so friggin' much with helping our lifestyle clients, because our approach isn't what they've tried in the past. And even though what they've tried in the past has failed time and time and time again, it's still like wired in their brain that that is the way to do things. And the example that comes to mind is when we try to tell a woman that they need to actually eat more food to lose fat, and they've been dieting their whole entire life. It's ingrained that less food equals less weight and that you're going to lose weight. But sometimes too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. And a lot of the times for women, under eating for too long actually is going to cause you to, it's really complicated, but it's going to cause you to start gaining weight. And it's not that under eating it's basically, it just downregulates your metabolism. And so this is super common that women will come to us and they refuse to eat more. And I'm like, you're paying us. We're the experts. We've transformed hundreds of women, and you still just won't trust the process, that you're so stuck in your ways of what worked in the past that this is why you're going to fail and it's not going to work. So you often see this also with people who are more advanced in their career. They don't want to take feedback from people. Especially people who have just made their names by introducing some critical changes years ago. And they're very stuck in their ways. So that's a big reason why people fail, is because they just don't give themselves the opportunity to learn or to change. And they often shy away from just further innovation because they are afraid of failure. And what worked for them 10 years ago is obviously going to work for them now, but it doesn't always work like that. And the reason the success of something new might even prove that those achievements they made in the past weren't so great after all, and why would they take the risk when you can hang on to your reputation by doing nothing? So they fear failure and they know they've won in the past, so they almost don't want to take action again because they'd rather be known for that than the possible chance that they might be wrong this time. So there's lots of reasons, and I think I'm going to stop it there because I could keep going on why the fear of failure will hold you back. But actually, no, I'm just going to talk about one more, because it's high achievers oftentimes will become losers, and successful people like to win and they achieve high standards, which when that is like a positive trait, like achievement becomes too strong in someone's life, it's on the way to becoming a major obstacle. And achievement is super powerful for many successful people. They achieve at everything they do: sports, college, hobbies, work, friendship. Each fresh achievement adds to the power of the value in their lives, and gradually failure becomes unthinkable, that they can't even imagine what that would be like, because they have just so many notches of success, and maybe they've literally never failed yet in anything that they've ever done, so they have no experience of rising above it, which is also going to be hard. And so the simplest way to do this is to never take a risk. Stick rigidly to what you know you can do, protect yourself working the longest hours, quadruple check absolutely everything, and be the most like conservative person in the universe, because you don't want to fail, because you don't know what it's like, because you've never done it. So you're just going to stay in your lane and you're never going to take any risk ever. And that is going to hold you back from becoming and reaching your full potential. So I'm going to wrap it up there with just why fear of failure will hold you back. And now we're going to get into how to overcome fear of failure, because that is step number 1. So confronting your fear of failure is proven to help you challenge it. And I think just becoming aware and understanding that you have a fear of failure is obviously going to be step number 1, but you really need to figure out where that fear comes from. So when you look at like what could be the cause of your fear of failure, which one resonates with you? And maybe it's something that I mentioned on earlier on, like maybe you got in really, really big trouble when you failed your grade 6 math test one time and you got grounded for a month. Or maybe you lost some sort of sport achievement or something like that when you were younger, and your coach got really mad at you and you had to run 100 laps, and now you have that fear of failure. So write down where you think that fear comes from and try to understand it as an outsider. So try to remove yourself from it. If it helps, like imagine you're trying to help one of your best friends. So almost try to remove yourself from the situation and pretend that this was your friend telling you this, and then understand how you would interpret that and what advice you would give them. So the next step is going to be learn to think positive. Our society is obviously obsessed with success, but it's important to recognize that even the most successful people encounter failure. And that is the way that you learn. And something that I often say to our clients is, I don't want you to be perfect. I don't want you to never fail. It's just what you decide to do when you do fail that matters. So in terms of like a fat loss journey, a fail would be maybe you ate one night and you ordered a pizza and ate the whole entire thing after you had all your meals and you weren't hungry. So that doesn't matter. Get that out of your brain. That does not matter. What matters is what you choose to do now. So do you hold a pity party for yourself? Do you go to try to run it off at the gym for 3 hours? Do you skip a whole bunch of meals the next day? Or do you just take the time, ask yourself what caused you to do that, analyze it, make a plan for next time something similar like that happens and how you can act differently to it, and just really start to see the lessons in the failure. So it doesn't matter if you fail, you're going to fail. In fact, one thing I'm going to touch on is planning to fail. But it's what you do once you're off. So learn to think positive. The next thing that you can do is reframe your beliefs about your goal. So having an all or nothing mentality leaves you with nothing sometimes, because it's all or nothing. So have a clear vision for what you'd like to accomplish, but include learning something new in your goal. So this often comes down to also just having a growth mindset where you aim for improvement, and learning makes you much less likely to fail. So how that can be kind of elaborated is that mindset like literally wants you to fail, because as long as you achieve your vision of whatever that may be along the way, then those stumbling blocks when you do fail are just opportunities to grow. And having a growth mindset is really hard. It can be changed from a fixed mindset, but it's hard. And it's even funny because with my mindset coach, we did all those tests, and where I graded was half in fixed mindset and half in growth mindset. And that was just mind-blowing to me, because I've also always said, well, for the past like 3 or 4 years, I'm like, I have such a growth mindset. Like, I can't understand people with a fixed mindset. And so it was very interesting to me to be like, damn, like there are certain points in my life where I do still struggle with a fixed mindset. A big one for me is imposter syndrome, just not feeling like I belong to be in this place that I am. And that's actually a fixed mindset, because that's holding me back. So that was a little rude awakening, but it's hard. And so even if you think I have a growth mindset, there's probably lots of parts of you that is actually still stuck in fixed, even if you don't think it. And then a really good one that really helps me, and they're kind of two together, but it's really take the time to understand all potential outcomes and look at the worst case scenario. Just look it straight at the face, ask what you would do to avoid it, what you could do when that happens, not avoid it, but what you could do if that were to happen, and like plan it out. Because a lot of the times fear of failure is actually the fear of the unknown, because as humans, we absolutely hate the unknown. We are not designed to enjoy the unknown. We don't want to go into the unknown. We like to be comfortable and secure because that's what we know. That's what we've focused on in the past. And so a lot of the times we're just scared of, because we don't know what could happen. So write down all the possible outcomes. And then the worst case, highlight the worst case scenario. What is the worst possible thing that's going to happen? And most of the time, it's not going to be the end of the world. Most of the time, a week after that happens, you're not even going to remember it. So it is super important to define how bad the worst case scenario is in the grand scheme of your life. And remember, you live in a massive universe. You're a human on a flying rock through space that turns without us even knowing it. And most of the time, your problems aren't that big a deal. So really learn to grade the worst case scenario in the grand scheme of your life. If this happened, ask yourself, in 3 days, would I care about it? In 3 months, would I care about it? In 3 years, would I care about it? In 3 decades, am I going to care about it? Most of the time, the answer is going to be no. And so that's going to make it a little bit easier for you to take that initial first step. And even to make yourself even feel more secure is have a backup plan. It never hurts to have a plan B. It's allowed. You're allowed to have it. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. The last thing you want to do is scramble for a solution when the worst has happened. So have a plan. If the worst case scenario happens, what am I going to do? How am I going to navigate that? And then also weigh the pros and cons. What are the chances the worst case scenario is going to happen? Okay, 1 in 10. It's probably not going to happen. Still going to have a little bit of a game plan, but it's still worth the risk of putting myself out there, because look at this massive list of pros. That's a really good chance that all of these are going to happen. So having a backup plan gives you more confidence to move forward and take calculated risks. And it makes sense because you know what you're going to do if everything kind of goes to shit at the last minute. So there are usually multiple ways to tackle a problem. So having a backup plan is a great way to just reduce any anxiety you might be feeling about possible failure. And then last but not least, this is my favorite one, is really try to find the lesson in whatever happens. And sometimes you might not learn that lesson right away. Sometimes you might not notice it till you're completely out of it. And 3 months later, you're like, I would have reacted differently in this situation if I didn't fail 3 months ago. So even a less than ideal situation can be a great opportunity to make changes and grow. And I think that there's always a lesson in anything that ever happens. And you really just have to start to understand that success to you shouldn't be about the end goal. It should be about the person that you become while reaching that goal. And this is super important to understand, because even if something is like weight loss, when you hit your goal weight, it is crazy how quickly you just set another goal, which is fine. Like, that's great. Keep growing, keep trying to be better. I love it. But if you just went through all of this shit to get to that goal, and then you barely even celebrated your new weight loss or whatever, it's like, does it even make it worth it? Like, why are you putting all this stress on you? But really what you should be looking at is, and what you are proud of, it, and the reason why you don't sit and celebrate a weight loss goal for 3 weeks is because you're proud of this, of yourself, for doing what you say you were going to do, sticking to your diet, setting boundaries and sticking to them. And you really learn how to fall in love with the process, as corny as that sounds, but it's totally true. You have to learn to understand the process, because if you hate the process and all you ever think about is that end goal, then the end goal is going to come and you're going to feel happy for 10, 20 minutes before you set another goal. And then you go back into the shit creek and you don't allow yourself to feel happy again until you reach that next goal. And then it's 10 minutes of happiness. And then before you know it, your whole entire life passes you by and you're not even happy for a quarter of it. Like, it just doesn't make sense. So really try to learn from whatever happens. And once you do understand that there isn't a lesson in everything, and then it's just going to make it that much easier to take that risk and to stick to it. So to sum everything up, failures are a blessing in disguise, and you don't really ever fail if you continue to just try. You'll always learn from your mistakes, and no matter what your goal is, you will reach it. Sometimes it's just faster for other people. Some people have to learn more lessons in the journey than others, which is totally fine. But just remind yourself of that. Failing is a good thing. And I would even, like I kind of mentioned it, planning for the worst case, like plan to fail. I can't remember, but I read this one thing that it was like, most people fail 7 times before they reach a goal. So plan for that. Plan to fail 7 times. And if you fail 7 times, then technically you're doing everything right. So just keep that in mind, especially as you're setting your New Year's resolutions. Don't let 2023 be the year that you hold back. Don't let it be the year that you don't go after what you truly want. Like, I literally can't imagine where I would be, how I would feel, and who I would have in my life if I never just understood that failing is a good thing. And I just never went after anything that I went after, because there was so much fear around so many things that I've done. But it gets easier as you continue to work through them. And then you can set yourself up, because kind of like, the bigger the chance of failure, the bigger the risk, the bigger the chance of reward. I don't know if that really came out right, but usually the bigger the prize, the bigger the risk, kind of thing. And so as you continue to learn through failure and you get more comfortable with it, you're comfortable taking bigger risks that have a higher chance of failure. But if you make it through, even if you fail a couple times in between, then the risk is really good. And it all starts from just taking that tiny little step. And when I was at the business conference a couple weeks ago, somebody said about just getting out of your comfort zone. Like, how do you even start to do that? Just take like one little half-inch step out your comfort zone, and nothing crazy is going to happen. You're going to realize that you'll get more comfortable, and then you're half an inch out of your comfort zone. Then take another step out. Now you're a foot out of your comfort zone. See if anything happens. Nothing happened. The world didn't burn down. So take another step out and just continue to do that. You don't need to go from being in your comfort zone to being like way the frick out of your comfort zone doing something crazy. But take little steps, because you learn, you become more just, I guess, successful and navigating out of your comfort zone. And that's where dreams happen, baby, is out of that comfort zone. So don't let the fear of failure hold you back this coming year. I hope you guys all set some big goals, make an action plan on how you're going to achieve them, and plan to fail 7 times. And if you just understand that failing is part of the journey, then you're not going to just kick it in the first time you fail, because you're like, well, that one down, sweet, failed one time, 6 times to go. And it'll just help you stay much more consistent with your goals. So hopefully you like this episode. If you have any questions, as always, just shoot me a message on Instagram. I hope you guys have a wonderful holiday season and a very happy new year, and talk to you next year.